Hey everybody, it's Eric from epautos.com, your libertarian car guy, and I thought I'd do a quick little video talk about changing oil, particularly changing oil in special vehicles or specialty vehicles if you like. Oil is particularly critical with vehicles that are specialty type vehicles that have specific requirements or which are subjected to specific conditions that are more extreme, for example, than the conditions that ordinary cars are subjected to. Motorcycles, for example. This is one of my bikes. It's an '03 Kawasaki ZRX 1200R, which has been slightly modified. But even so, it being a sport bike, it has a very high revving engine. More than 10,000 RPM is common for sport bikes, which is why it's very, very important to not skimp when it comes to changing oil in your high-performance sport bike. I like to use AMSOIL. I actually use AMSOIL for all my vehicles, and I'll talk about one of my other vehicles here in a moment. And I use this product, which is their metric motorcycle oil, which is a very superior product. It's a real synthetic. It's not one of the lower cost converted to synthetics that you can sometimes find for what appears to be a cheap price, but in fact you're really going to be paying the price, in my opinion, if you suffer a mechanical failure or have another problem as a result of using the lower quality oil. I wouldn't use anything but synthetics, frankly, in any of my bikes, except for perhaps my very old bikes, the two under the cover there, which were designed back in the day when synthetics were slim to non-existent. And there are some other issues with using synthetics in very old vehicles, and those vehicles are pushing 50 years old now, and I'll talk about those in another video. But at any rate, I like to use AMSOIL here on my sport bike because I can feel confident about not having an oil-related issue in the thing. The synthetic flows very, very well at low temperatures, and it offers great protection at high temperatures. And if you have an air-cooled bike, that's a particular concern. There aren't that many air-cooled sport bikes anymore, I realize, but nonetheless, that's one of the big advantages of using a synthetic oil in a high-performance motorcycle. Also, I use AMSOIL here in my old muscle car, and they actually have an oil that is specifically formulated for old American muscle cars and for older cars in general that have what are called flat tappet camshafts. These differ from the modern roller type camshafts that are used in most modern vehicles. And the reason that this is an important consideration is that modern oils have had most of the additives which serve to keep a flat tappet camshaft in good operating condition taken out, chiefly for reasons having to do with emissions control. It's not a factor for modern cars. Modern oils, including high-performance modern synthetics, are fine in a modern car. They were designed for that. But if you happen to own an older vehicle like my old Trans Am here, you really want to use an oil that has the necessary additives for the flat tappet camshaft. Again, I use AMSOIL. They have a product called Z-Rod. It's available in two viscosities. I use the 10W30. They also have it in, and this is just off the top of my head, I think it's a 2050 weight, which for me is a bit too heavy, particularly since it does get cold here in the woods of Southwest Virginia, and so I like to use a lighter weight oil, and I've had very, very good experience with it. And one of the things that I very much like about the product is that it extends the change-out intervals. In addition to protecting a valuable older engine like this, getting hard to find Pontiac 455 engines, but I feel completely confident in changing my oil and filter just once a year. Even though the car doesn't see a lot of miles, I do it regardless once a year. Now, I used to, in the past, sometimes I would change it in the spring and the fall out of a sense of excessive caution because, again, I figured that oil and filter and my time certainly less expensive than having to worry about an oil-related failure. The AMSOIL is specifically designed for the longer change-out intervals, and it's specifically formulated for cars like mine that not only may go a long time in between oil changes, but which don't see a lot of use in between oil changes. I just did the oil change for the first time in about a year. I do it about once a year, as I mentioned. And during that previous year, I only drove the car 480 miles. So, you know, And the reason that that is an important factor to take into account as far as oil goes, you'd think, well, only 400 something, 500 something miles, not much wear occurs. But just by dint of the fact that the car sits a lot, it is more prone to the accumulation of things like moisture in the crankcase and just general contamination, which the oil does hold in suspension, but it's a particular issue affecting lightly driven cars. It's actually considered severe service, believe it or not, by most engineers. So keep that in mind when you're shopping for oil. And again, I'm personally vouching for the AMSOIL products because I personally use them, really believe in the products, and just thought I'd share that with you. And now I'm going to go ahead and top off my bike, and if the weather is cooperative, I'm going to take it out for a ride. So thanks for viewing, and we'll catch up with you again soon.